the Netflix documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer tells a hugely disturbing story, but I want to talk about the 5 very important case details that they left out and why. And I also want to end on the biggest unanswered question of all. Now, when I was in the police, I spent years investigating stalking cases and safeguarding victims of domestic abuse. So when I watched the Netflix documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer, I decided to do a little digging of my own because I felt like there was more to the case. But this was on another level. This was murder. So the story is about a 37-year-old single mom named Cari Farver, and she had a 14-year-old son named Max, and she worked as a computer programmer. She disappeared in Omaha, Nebraska after dating a man named Dave Kroupa who worked in a garage. But there was someone else on Dave's radar, and her name was Shanna Golyar, known as Liz, and she was watching Cari's every move. They'd not been dating long when Cari stayed over at Dave's one night, and Liz happened to turn up at his door saying she needed to pick up something. Well, as you can imagine, that was really awkward, and Cari left. But after Liz had been and gone, the two contacted each other again, and she invited Dave over to hers, and he stayed over. They both had children. They both just wanted to enjoy the company of another person without getting married or properly dating or anything like that. So the ground rules were set really early on. So when they parted, Dave was really surprised to receive a text from Cari asking if she could move in with him, and he tried to be polite but firm, and he said no. But the thing is, after the couple spent the night together, Cari would never be seen again. And soon after she vanished, thousands of aggressive messages started appearing from Cari's phone and email accounts. And these messages, they really laid into Dave, his ex-girlfriend Liz, and even members of their families. And for years it looked as if Cari had just become a dangerous stalker who refused to let go. So eventually they discovered something far more disturbing. The woman sending those messages wasn't Cari at all, because Cari had been murdered. There was a stalker on the loose. And this is something that I have almost a decade of experience in dealing with. So the first case detail that Netflix left out was the identity takeover, because messages began appearing from Cari's phone, or at least it said it was from Cari's phone, and one of those messages goes to Cari's employer saying that she's quitting her job. Now that might not seem all that unusual, especially if someone's in the middle of what was deemed a mental health crisis, because Cari did suffer from bipolar in the past, and she'd suffered from depression, and perhaps people thought, well, they labelled her with that again and thought, okay, she needs a break, she wants to quit her job. But the message doesn't stop there. It also suggests that someone else should take her position. Now, she had a good job. She was a computer programmer, yet a lot of these texts and messages were spelled badly or the grammar was bad. But the person that was suggested to take her place was Liz Golyar. And from what I've read, as I said, her legal name is Shanna Golyar, but she is mostly known as Liz. And it's hard to believe this, but Liz then goes and submits her application for the job. Now that is a strange move for any crime case, and a bit of a stupid move too, because she's immediately implicating herself there, but it wasn't picked up straight away. Because it suggests that someone wasn't just communicating as Cari, they were basically trying to replace her. And again, it's like a movie or a book in which a stalker comes and tries to replace that person, dressing as her, taking on their family and stepping into her shoes. Well, it seems she was starting with her job. It's just unbelievable in real life though, isn't it? Now, the second thing that Netflix didn't mention is the bedroom furniture. Just a few days later, another strange message appears, and this time it's sent to Cari's mother. And the message said that Cari has sold her bedroom furniture, and that's kind of odd in itself because, as you say, Cari had a son, she had commitments, she had a job, she had a life. But guess who the person buying this bedroom furniture was? Yeah, none other than Liz. The message even included a photograph of a cheque made out to Cari and signed by Liz. And Cari's mother got this message and she thought, no, hang on a minute, this is not right. It didn't sound like her daughter and the circumstances were all wrong. And that mother's instinct would later turn out to be really, really important. And I think it's such a shame that she hadn't been listened to earlier on. And Lover, Stalker, Killer was really just, they seemed like the craziest documentary because it's like something that I would write in one of my crime thriller novels. was. I mean, you just can't believe the twists in it. It got to the point where I thought, is this a believable story, or are Netflix playing up to it? And what parts of the investigation have they actually left out? So I went and done some digging of my own, and I was really surprised at what I found. And it makes you wonder just how much artistic license do Netflix actually use when it comes to cases like these. And if that wasn't strange enough, there was another detail that I dug up that almost nobody has mentioned. Just 3 days after Cari disappeared, her debit card was used in Omaha. And the Netflix documentary, it talked about bank transactions a couple of days after she disappeared, but they didn't mention from where or for what. And I don't know why really, because this is quite important when it comes to this case. So one of the items purchased was a black and white floral shower curtain. And that on its own, it might not seem like much because, you know, you might buy something and it might take a couple of days before it shows up in your bank account. But later, when investigators searched Liz's home, yep, they found that exact shower curtain. Sometimes it's the smallest of details that really start connecting the dots. But again, this wasn't discovered until much later on. And it's so bizarre, but I guess thinking about it, the reason Netflix didn't mention it was because they wanted to stage the story in a certain way. And if they had mentioned that earlier on, then you might think, well, someone else is involved in this, or Cari herself was not the stalker after all. I mean, Netflix is kind of known for its big twists, isn't it? And I have to say, I do enjoy those oh my god moments. So maybe, yeah, they didn't want to spoil the story. And Liz, she staged herself as the victim. For years after Cari disappeared, Liz told police that she was a victim, she was being stalked. But she keyed her own car. She burned her own house down, despite having children who must have been really scared. And she even killed her own pets. And then she went on to shoot herself with Dave's gun. Her house caught fire in 2013, killing several of her pets. And oh my gosh, the pets really bothered me because as a crime author even, I know when I'm writing thrillers never to kill the fictional pets because I think as humans we kind of get desensitized to hearing about people being hurt and murdered because it's just been fed to us all day, every day on the news. But pets, oh, they're a different story, aren't they? And I had to go looking to see what pets they were because there was nothing about them in the Netflix documentary. So for the record, she had 2 dogs, 1 cat and a snake. So why did she burn down her house? Well, I also found out that she was due to be evicted anyway. So perhaps she thought she had no investment in it and she just thought, to hell with it, burn it down and I'll be the victim. And it really did step things up because her and Dave reignited their relationship at one point. But then in 2015, Liz turned up with a gunshot wound to her leg. And I know this was mentioned in the Netflix documentary, but I have a question. Well, I have so many questions. But one question is, what happened to the gun that she shot herself with? Because you think if the police got to the scene, this is a potential attempted murder investigation. It's high risk, there's a stalker. Wasn't the area searched? Unless she hid it on herself, which is possible maybe if it was a small gun. I mean, we do take forensics from victims of crime. I've done it many times myself, but I've never physically searched a victim because, yeah, they're the victim, aren't they? They're rushed to hospital. Although I imagine the hospital would have had to remove her clothing at some point. It's really confusing, isn't it? It's like, what did she do with the gun? If she threw it somewhere, why wasn't it searched? Unless maybe she put it in a vehicle or hid it there, very confident and cocky that her place wouldn't be searched. So the fourth thing that Netflix didn't really cover in detail came from a memory card that investigators recovered during the case. And I did think that was a great move on behalf of the investigators to say, look, are there any other electrical items? And you know, I always thought if you delete something from an SD card that it's gone forevermore, but the experts moved in and he found deleted items from the card, and that is really great police work. It contained thousands of images, which would have taken it quite a while to go through, but one of them weren't mentioned in the Netflix documentary. And when I was in the police, I used to love to be given things like this. And I don't mean to sound like dark or disturbed, but there was something very satisfactory about working your way through images and texts and things like that. And my sergeant always gave me the really detailed cases because I think as an Irish person, I'm naturally very nosy. This is why I loved investigating. It was about me really wanting a result, really wanting to be that person who found that result and found something important and moved that case forward. Because to me, the victim was always at the back of my mind when I investigated cases. So to find something like what they found here, it must have felt amazing for that person. Although I know it is dark and gory, but you kind of do get desensitized to that as a police officer. I think it would have felt like a big win at the time. So among the images were photographs of what appeared to be human body parts, as well as tarpaulin covering it. So there was more than one image that was really significant to the case. And the investigators, firstly, as was mentioned in the documentary, they found an image of a decomposing foot. But we weren't told that they also found the image of part of a hip. Now, both were showing tattoos, not just one, but two. And those tattoos matched the ones belonging to Cari Farver. And I remember when I was joining the police, I had a tattoo. Well, I have a few now, but they were making great details on it. And I said, what's so interesting? Why are you noting down my tattoo? And they said, oh, we love tattoos. They're brilliant. And I went, oh, really? Wait to have this chat about tattoos. And she goes, yeah, because it's a great way of identifying dead bodies. Like, oh, thanks. Well, that's reassuring before I even start the job. But tattoos really are a game changer for police and really useful for identifying bodies. And it certainly worked in this case. And to the police, not one but two tattoos belonging to Cari would have suggested that she had been murdered. Now, the fifth element that wasn't covered is the most disturbing thing of all. There's another detail connected to Liz's past that the documentary barely touches on, and it really did blow my mind. I had to go back and check it and recheck it because I couldn't believe it hadn't been mentioned. Because police, often when you're investigating a current case, you really have to dig into their past too and speak to as many people as possible, gain as many statements as possible, and really put together a picture of who they were and why. So years before Cari Farver's case, Liz had a little boy named Cody who was 5 months old, and she had him with her boyfriend Glenn Herr. Now Glenn had learning difficulties because he had a brain injury from when he was a child, and they had the child together, and Glenn did seem to be a devoted father to the little boy. But sadly, Cody died in 1999 after suffering injuries that doctors said were consistent with shaken baby syndrome. Now, this is not a natural cause of death. It means someone shook the poor baby until he suffered from brain death. Both Liz and her boyfriend Glenn became instant suspects for his death. And Glenn told officers that he occasionally tossed the boy into the air to make him laugh or played airplane games with him. But lots of parents do that. That's not an abnormal thing to do. But Liz, she did not stand by her boyfriend. Oh no, she testified against him. She even said that he wrote to her asking her to lie for him. So she produced these really incriminating letters which were said to have been written in really flowery language. And where have we heard something like that before? He pleaded guilty. I think he'd almost convinced himself that he was guilty, and he was convicted of the child's death and he served time in prison. I guess he would have been told to plead guilty to get a lighter sentence, and it wasn't as if it was murder, that it was intentional. If he convinced himself, gosh, this must have happened when I was throwing him in the air and it's all my fault and I deserve to suffer, then that's what happened. Family members, though, they said that her reaction to her son's death just didn't add up. She was really subdued compared to her boyfriend, who had been absolutely devastated. However, after Liz was later convicted in the Cari Farver case, he publicly claimed that she was actually responsible. And those claims have never been proven in court, and his conviction still stands. But still, you have to wonder, don't you? Now, I have one more question that you're going to want the answer to. And the biggest question of all is why? Because if you've come fresh from watching this documentary, I know if you're like me, you'll be saying, whoa, that was some crazy story. Why the heck would someone go through all that? When I worked in the police, people really needed to know why perpetrators behaved in the way they did. It's only natural to have questions because as humans, when something bad happens, we really need to make sense of it. Otherwise, we feel like we're on shaky ground. Now, I'm no doctor or mental health professional, but I have dealt with many stalker cases in my career that spanned almost a decade. In Liz's case, I believe that her main driver was control and fixation. Everything was about her. Now, many stalking cases involve a really intense need to control relationships or narratives. So sending those messages allowed her to remove or get rid of her romantic rival and to stay close to the man she wanted. It also helped her to control how everyone else perceived the situation and really kept herself firmly positioned as the victim in all of this, so people wouldn't look at her as a suspect. And yeah, it's almost like a snow globe, if you imagine, where Dave is right in the middle of it and she gives it a good shake. And her deception was her way of controlling the social environment around Dave. Now, this part is called narrative construction, and it means that offenders, they sometimes construct a whole story that protects them, and it has to be really elaborate to be able to pull it off. So I imagine the story would have started off by her saying, Carrie's alive, she's really unstable, and she's stalking just about everyone. And because of her bipolar diagnosis, initially police believed it. The more messages that Liz sent, the more believable the story appeared. And investigators sometimes describe this as building a false reality. And then there's a psychological investment to it. Once someone commits to a deception that large, they really become invested in maintaining it. Otherwise, all that work would have been for nothing. Because backing out, it would mean admitting that had been a lie all along. It would expose the original crime. And so she has no choice but to make the behaviour escalate. More name calling, more threats, more following, until that's all she can think about in her mind. And it really had become a full-time activity for Liz, because maintaining this lie, it for her required constant reinforcement. Because she couldn't think for a second that she was doing the wrong thing. In her mind, she was in the right, she was the victim, and everything revolved around how she felt, how people treated her, not the other way around. It became a total compulsion. And there's also a darker side of it, and also could be the reason why some people kill. They get a thrill out of it. They get emotional stimulation from perhaps what had been a boring life. They get all this attention from police, who they could see as really important figures in the world. They get emotional reactions from victims, and they get satisfaction out of that too. Like, she would have got a lot of satisfaction out of seeing Dave suffer for her perception of being unfaithful to her. They get a sense of superiority, as deceiving others can really make them feel good about themselves. But as the police very, very well put in their Netflix drama, they said, well, she was playing checkers, we were playing chess. And I thought that was a very good line. But to her, she was the one in control. She was making them run around, and that feedback loop really reinforces her behaviour over time. It makes her feel good, so she's going to keep doing it, and she's going to keep doing it because it makes her feel good. And in some extreme cases, I've seen this for myself, where offenders, they really start to inhabit the identity that they've created. Like, they've created this identity as a victim, which gives them lots of love and reassurance from other people and gives them lots of attention. They almost believe they are the victim. And I have seen offenders who will tell you black as white and are so convincing that you almost believe them. And I did a case recently, I covered about Lucy Letby, and I had so many comments on that case, but many comments said she's not guilty because at no point during those interviews did she look guilty. Or at no point when the police spoke to her during that documentary did she look guilty for 1 second. Did she say anything out of place? Did she act like she had done this? Despite her having notes in her home saying, I am guilty, I did this, I am evil. And you're going to have to watch that case for more. But the point is, offenders don't look guilty. And I think this is what is so disturbing for so many people, because they don't want to think that the person that they live with or the person next door or anyone that they know could be capable of something so horrendous. So people really push against that, and they give real flack to the people who are, enforcing that, saying, yes, ordinary people can kill. People don't always act guilty. And in Liz's case, she had taken on so many different personas. She was the victim of stalking, she was the person sending the threats, and the person guiding the investigation. And maintaining all of these roles really can become addictive. And this was a very unusual case because it went on for so long. Most people would give up by now. And I know the advice we always give victims of stalking, we say, do not respond. Whatever you do, don't respond, and they will give up in the end. Change your number, change your email. If it gets bad enough, you have to move away, do so. But the lack of response usually cuts it dead. But she kept going on, and not just David, his ex and Carrie's mother and so many other people were involved. And the 50,000 messages really reveals Liz's personality, and it makes you wonder what went wrong in her life to make her like this. Because quite often such behaviour, it can come from childhood issues. And I think she would have continued, because if police hadn't stopped her when she did, I'm sure more people would have died. She was a very, very dangerous person. I mean, she didn't even know Cari, but she would have had this whole story in her head of what Cari was out to do. Cari was going to take her man. And that poor woman who had only been casually dating this guy would have probably been killed in her car by this stranger that she didn't even know, and probably made to give up her passwords and things like that. And this Liz finished her off after she did that, and she was able to get into her phone and follow it up. She would have had it planned in her head. But now I'm turning it back to you. What do you think drove Liz to act this way? And should police have listened to Cari's mother sooner, or did they do a really good job by putting together all these intricate pieces and solving the case? And I mean, hindsight, it is a wonderful thing. And this case, well, it really would have been different to anything else they had ever dealt with. Also, it's really hard to prove murder without a body too. And if you're interested in cases like these and you'd like to see more, then don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, check out my case recommendation that is coming up next. I'd love to know also what you thought of the Netflix documentary. It was just so interesting. And if there's any other documentaries that you'd like me to cover, because I'm sure there's always parts of an investigation that have been left out. But thank you for joining me. And it really is food for thought, isn't it? So until next time, bye-bye for now.